All right, hello. Let's talk about what the consulting toolkit is. This is something I've slowly been developing over the last little while with my time in the management and strategy consulting space, and I thought it might be something that would be useful to share. So from an agenda perspective, we're just going to be talking about a skills framework for what are the key components of this consulting toolkit concept. So in a nutshell, the consulting toolkit represents all of the competencies that you can expect to demonstrate as you continue your journey as a consultant and develop those skills that enable you to solve problems and work together with clients. So what I've done here is, based on my understanding of what I've learned and how I'm being assessed, I've built up a pretty rudimentary framework for what the consulting toolkit should be. And this spans two key areas, those being problem management, so what exactly are you solving for, and people management, who are you working with to solve said problem. In general, the problem side can be broken down into the actual solving component, as well as how you go about structuring that work. So the left-hand side being the process, the right-hand side being what is the timeline that's used to assess the feasibility of your approach. Then on the right-hand side, you also have the people management side. So this is where you go into how are you working with other people, and it's not necessarily limited to just the client. So this could be verbal and written comms for internal purposes as well as for external purposes with the client. And if you were to break those down into the actual skills and activities you can expect to be doing on a daily basis, this would be doing things like first principles thinking. So given no prior information on a certain type of area, or if you're trying to come up with a blue sky solution, so this would be like if you could do anything in an ideal world, how exactly would you solve this problem? Then there's the actual hypothesis development phase, which involves, so if you're able to apply those first principles, how would you go about figuring out what is a good solution and how can you create a sort of metric for defining that solution so that you can determine what analyses are required to solve the problem. Then there's the actual financial modeling component. So typically there'll be a quant component to any problem that you're solving for. And this involves building a model that could, say, quantify the benefits associated with the change you're proposing. There's also things like running client workshops. So running sessions with the client to capture data, ask questions, and make sure that you're fully aligned on what exactly you're solving for and that everyone has buy-in for the solution that you're trying to produce. And lastly, this is probably the most critical component of what any consultant will do. It's synthesizing insights. So in general, you'll be gathering a lot of information and your job is to synthesize what is the insight, right? We're all synthesizers. We're able to learn things that take a lot of time, condense them down, and then be able to communicate it. So something like this one page, this is based on about 1.5 years of experience, and it's synthesizing what exactly do I think the consulting toolkit represents, and putting it into a form that is really easily digestible and is structured in such a way that my audience that I'm expecting to consume this video can also resonate with it. Then you go into the work structuring component. So this would be things like writing proposals, creating those work plans. How would you go about building, say, a Gantt chart to show the timeline for all the various milestones and actions you can expect would happen in order to complete a deliverable? You'll also have to work on things like people management, delegating tasks, and assessing workload complexity. So this would be sort of as you gain more experience, you can more accurately gauge whether an activity will take a long time or not. And then that flows into your work plan. And lastly, validating your approach with the client. So this would be taking whatever you've produced and testing it with the client to make sure that everything aligns with how they think things should run, gathering inputs, and say, if you have an idea for how something should happen and they happen to have more insights, capturing that insight so that you can create a more accurate estimate for how you think things will pan out. And then when you jump over into the actual communication side of things, this is more skewed towards, say, the soft skill side. You have your comms. So public speaking, building rapport, building those relationships, and also being able to push back, say, on certain things. These are all extremely important skills when it comes to consulting, as generally you'll be working with people, right? Like these are your clients. This isn't just external stakeholders, this is also like internally. So say your manager, the partner on your job, those are the people that you're actually working with as well. And you have to make sure that you're on the same page as everyone else. Then being able to, say, observe the reactions of people. So as you're presenting, being able to present information and also maintain engagement with the listeners. That's an extremely important skill. And then finally, you'd have things like coaching and mentoring. So as you progress, you'll have opportunities to work with other people who probably aren't as experienced as you are, or you'll be guiding some people, or you'll be running a team, and you'll have to make sure that you're able to work with them while providing opportunities for continued development and also delegating said tasks as we described earlier in the work structuring component. And then when you jump to your written skills, those would be things like deck writing. So here you'd be applying your horizontal and vertical logic to make sure that your argument is structured succinctly, as well as it's self-consistent. So within a page, everything relevant to the lead line is represented on the page. And then horizontally, you'd say from the front to the back, that this takes a answer first approach that resembles something called the pyramid principle. So that's how you should lay out your information. You'd use the pyramid principle to lay out your deck horizontally, with the answer at the beginning and then all of your supporting slides behind it to answer any of the questions that may arise from the first slide. And then you also have your vertical logic, which you apply within each slide to make sure that anything that you're claiming in your lead line is represented with evidence on the page. Then there are things like managing general comms with stakeholders. This could be in the form of email communication, and then also tracking things like how exactly is the messaging of my email, say, or the optics of my email going to impact stakeholders? Because sometimes you might be talking about some very delicate subjects, and they may require a little bit of care when you're going about navigating a certain situation. Second to last, you'd have your data visualization component. So a lot of what you write or what you create or anything you present has to be represented in such a way that people in your target audience are able to digest it easily, because as a consultant, your job is to do the legwork so that they don't have to. So you're trying to elevate the granular data into something that they can consume at a glance and then pull those key insights. And lastly, you'd have managing those client data requests. So this is things like, as part of your work structuring, you should also make sure you include buffers for things like data requests, because sometimes the turnaround on these requests is extremely slow. You have to make sure that you're adequately provisioning time for unexpected changes in scope, and also making sure that you're able to get that data and you know how responsive the client is for certain types of requests. So if I was to provide 3 tips on how I think this framework would be best applied to support your development, I would say identify gaps in your capabilities as soon as possible to accelerate your general consulting toolkit development as fast as possible. The reason why is that self-awareness can allow you to become extremely directed in terms of how you progress, and it can actually steer you towards picking different types of projects in order to make sure you're meeting your development needs. In general, I would also say prioritize the hard skills early on. So that would be things that skew more towards the left-hand side of this framework. The reason being, those are things that are relatively mechanical, but they are necessary. So I would say this would be things like financial modeling and writing decks. If you're able to do those on autopilot, then you'll have a much easier time focusing on the nuances and intricacies of all the soft skills you'll have to develop in managing stakeholders. Those are things that are inherently slower to develop and will require more experience in order to actually gain a good level of proficiency. And lastly, just make sure you're frequently requesting feedback from your job managers. So I would say that you should probably be checking in at least once a month, if not more frequently, perhaps every fortnight, in order to get feedback on how you're performing, whether there are specific things that need to be adjusted, whether tactical or not. And say if you just finished like a presentation that was pretty key to your development, or it's the first time you did something, or you just want some insights into how you're performing, just on the spot, make sure you're asking, like post that meeting, is there any general feedback you have on how I performed in that meeting, say? Because I think that's quite important in the moment to be able to get an idea of how you did, what needs to change, or what you should be focusing on in, say this was in the middle of a break during a meeting, you can ask for that feedback and then you can continue to apply it immediately in the second half once you get it. So in general, I'd say that this is a pretty holistic view for what you can expect as a junior in the consulting space. And I think if you're able to apply it correctly and look at how you will be assessed in, say, your performance review or appraisal process, then you'll be well ahead of the curve in terms of figuring out where you're heading and how you should be developing your skills to become the most well-rounded consultant that you can be. So that was everything. Thanks for watching.